Good afternoon from Barcelona. First, two preliminary reflections, no? One about time and the other about geography. I think that about geography, it's important to, even if we are talking about global challenges, no? Like pandemic, every city on every region react in a different way. No? So I think I will be talking about a particular model of city, which is the European one, which is a model of compactness, of density, a very formal city, I mean, with a public space highly designed, with a city quite planned, with even with public authorities that try to lead the urban agenda and the urban development in an important way. So this is a model that can be very different for more informal cities. And I think that the session that Hendrik announced in June about informal cities could be in this sense very interesting, or today the contrast with Sharmila in India. No? So I think that this to see this different socio-cultural context is important, even if we are facing global trends. The other one about the time is the fact that, as Lens said, I think it's very important to distinguish the short-term actions that cities are taken in front of the COVID in an emergency situation. And I think that the point is to see which will be the influences with these short actions to the long-term transformation of public space and of cities. No? In which way, as Luisa said in her introduction, at this moment, the actions will accelerate, will change, will produce some shift in the trends that were transforming mobility, that were transforming public space, and so on. No? So I think thinking in the short-term actions, one thing that we have learned is the importance of the time factor in these actions. So it's not only the design of public space, but also the way in which we manage the use we do of public space, for instance, with time slots. No? Not all the people can exit during the lockdown at the same time. There are time slots for children, time slots for elderly people, time slots for sport activities, and so on. Or the fact that we can regulate the time we spend in a particular public space. In the future, in a beach maybe, or in a park, we will not be able to stay more than 2 hours to let room to other people to use this space. So I mean, or the fact that the online work can help to extend a little bit the time schedule of entrance and exit from the work to avoid the peak hours in the public transportation, or so on. No? So I mean, there are many measures, many actions that are related not to the design, but to the management of the public space using the time, the factor time. Then another one is the importance of tactical urbanism, no? That Luisa explained it clearly in her presentation. So let's say a quick implementation, a low-cost urbanism, reversible, that can be temporary. But as you said, I think at this moment, the tactical urbanism is a test to try if this idea of reducing the cars in the city can be accelerated, taking advantage of learning some lessons from the pandemic. The pandemic. So this is this issue of the reducing the amount of cars in the streets to green the city, to green the streets, to create more civic places, to create more way for more sustainable modes of transportations like walking or biking, and so on. I think in this point it's important to address the economic impacts of these actions, no? Because now we are, at least in Barcelona, is also a city that is launching this kind of, accelerating this kind of measures. We are seeing the resistance from mainly the employees saying, well, this will have impacts on the competitiveness of the city, thinking about construction or the library sectors that can have, if we reduce the number of car lanes, will be concerned by this possibility, or even the automotive industry. No? If we are saying we are going to reduce the number of cars and the amount of private cars, the car industry is very important, as tourism it is another one, but the car industry is also in our economy. So I think it's very important to assess in some way which will be the impacts of reducing the car in the city to sustain the discourse about the reduction of the cars, which is for me a very important point concerning public health in our cities. And the last point is that it's not only about streets, but it's also about the social gathering places. No? In some situations of social distance requirements, how we can increase the spaces where we can meet in the short term. This is not easy in very complex cities. Sometimes we can use tactical urbanism and say we are going to close some streets during the weekend, so we are using traffic space for gathering places. Or also, we have seen in some cities the recovery of some places, some small community places like the rooftops that in the past were very lively, and maybe it's a possibility to recover them again as gathering places, these semi-private, semi-public spaces, which are transitional spaces, which are, Ian Gale himself says the importance of these transitional spaces between the fully public and the totally private dwellings. And I think it's also a movement related to the greening of the city, as many of these rooftops could be also green rooftops. No? So these possibilities of thinking about if we are not going to concentrate in the same social gathering places, we can find new ones, as can be the rooftops, or even the big metropolitan open places like agrarian parks, for instance, in some surrounding some European cities. So it's also a possibility to diversify the places where we can try to have social meetings and social activities. Regarding the digitalization of the city, I think that it's important what Lance was saying about the internet as a human right, in the sense that digitalization, IT technologies can be very useful at both top-down and bottom-up. No? So I think top-down, they can be useful in planning. I think we are looking a new generation of plans where we are able to plan addressing and treating data about users, about activities, and this can make a more flexible plan, not only flexible public space, but also flexible planning. Then in the management of public space with, for instance, intelligent traffic systems and so on. So top-down, there is a clear use of technologies to improve our cities. But also, as Richard Sennett underlines, it's the opportunities bottom-up are very important in the sense to building cooperative projects, community projects that intranets and small platforms like Zoom, for instance, can help to this kind of projects. And then I think that the pandemic is showing opportunities, as said Lance, both in the top-down approach and to the bottom-up experiences. No? And the other question, which is not only about digital, but about what was pointing Sharmila, no? About the impact on, should we reconsider the approach to planning? So I think it's the question about density, no? Which is another important one. So because of the pandemic, should our cities become less dense? And this is for planners an important question. And I think probably the answer is not thinking about this desperate need for socializing that Lance was talking about. I think that maybe one century ago, density related with other lacks of sanitary conditions and so on, was a cause of public disease. But nowadays, maybe mobility with pollution and with some sedentary ways of life is more a cause of diseases, of urban diseases, rather than the contagious, infectious illnesses. No? So in that sense, I think it's important to keep the reflection on the density, on the advantages of density in terms of sustainable mobility, in terms of an efficient providing of energy and so on, and that this to make possible quality of life in dense context, it's important to have a good system of open public spaces. This is the condition, which is not only the amount of public space, but as was said before, a diverse typology of public space, a good distribution of this public space. So I think the point of saying, no, our city should continue to be reasonable dense, but for this, it's important to have the good system of public space, qualitative and quantitative.